Here to discuss the biggest federal tech and cyber news of 2022 and the issues to watch in 2023 are Jill Aitoro, Senior Vice President of Content Strategy for CyberRisk Alliance, and Ross Wilkers, Senior Staff Reporter at Washington Technology. Welcome to both of you. Jill, I want to start with you.
Okay.
We'll start with cybersecurity. How would you say that the war in Ukraine influenced cyber efforts in the U.S.?
Ukraine was interesting because it really demonstrated how potential cyber warfare evolves. You know, we did have Cyber Command involved in the sense that they've talked a lot about efforts that led up to the Russian invasion, where they partnered with Ukraine and helped them develop their skill sets, even did like pen testing with them, a degree of tabletop exercises there. Which contributed to Ukraine's ability to respond. But what really for the U.S. was interesting was the degree of threat intelligence sharing that went on from the U.S. to Ukraine to allies, which was pretty critical. But you did also see ransomware gangs and cyber criminals kind of jump on the bandwagon and target the allies, targeting Ukraine. So it showed how expansive cyber warfare will ultimately be moving forward.
And Ross, what developments have you seen in cybersecurity compliance over the course of 2022?
Slow ball has been moving forward towards this four-letter acronym called CMMC that's caused more fear and loathing in the tech industry than a lot of others, to get more visibility into where companies are buying software and products, given that a lot of technology in the world has been made in China, and the U.S. government is paying closer attention to that.
So how are federal contractors doing in meeting compliance requirements?
We will find out next year when a final rule comes out from the White House. There have been various draft iterations trying to tell everybody in the public sector ecosystem, you've got to get ready, this visibility, this regulation is coming. So between the first half of next year, we'll see it, and those that are not ready, they're just going to be left behind.
Well, Jill, speaking of the White House, the Biden administration issued a number of cyber regulations. What are some of the big ones?
So there was quite a bit that was focused on the critical infrastructure. You have to remember that Biden administration kicked off right after SolarWinds, or during SolarWinds, I should say, during the Microsoft Exchange server vulnerability, and then soon after Colonial Pipeline. So you initially saw quite a bit that focused on securing the critical infrastructure organizations across the United States. But then it did also transition because of supply chain attacks, among other vulnerabilities that were exposed through those various situations that evolved over the year, to focus on zero trust and the federal agencies locking down their own infrastructure, but also that trickle-down impact that can extend to private sector companies, and a lot of focus on collaboration and partnership. I think we saw in SolarWinds a real lack of collaboration, or at least it was a bit delayed in the need for public and private sector to work together to address some of these issues. So that has also been a significant focus moving forward.
And where are agencies in implementing those regulations, especially zero trust?
Yeah, zero trust was a tricky one because it did have quite a laundry list in terms of locking down the system. In theory, agencies should have been moving along in the right direction already, but there's still quite a ways to go, and it really does depend on the agency. You have some of the larger agencies that are further along, I would say, because they already had been on that road, and a lot of the smaller agencies that really still are looking for support, often from the larger agencies, to get where they need to go. So this is going to be really focused throughout 2023, I would say.
And Ross, Jill mentioned supply chain. A big issue was the chip shortage in 2022. What's going on with that?
Computer chips go in cars, they go in IT systems, they go in weapon systems, they go in everything that's important in the world, and there just has not been enough of them to go around in the world, and too few of them come from these little factories in Taiwan. China's next door, world events. So not just our government, but a lot of governments around the world are starting to see the importance of semiconductors, these tiny little chips that have been around in the world for decades. Everything runs on them.
So then we have the CHIPS Act.
We have the CHIPS Act, which has two parts. There's a $52 billion subsidy that, the way to think about that is to jumpstart the production, right? Get get that supply chain going. And then there's the second part, which is at least $200 billion on top of that. That's more about long-term development and making sure that it's essentially built to last for the next 50 years and 100 years. So the U.S. wants to be the #1 producer of chips in the world.
Jill, what are you going to be watching in 2023? What's the big thing that's going to be happening?
I think in terms of cybersecurity, there's a real need for global standards or compliance. The United States, to be honest, is almost behind, I would argue, especially when it comes to like digital identities and access and creating standards, partly because we have so many state regulations that contribute to how we handle those sorts of things. So I think that will be a big priority for the Biden administration. And while we didn't see a huge amount of cyber issues with the election for midterms, I do think disinformation is going to be something that is a focus for the next year, the next 2 years leading up to the election in terms of making sure false info is getting out.
Ross, 20 seconds. What's the big thing for next year?
Inflation. People and parts, they just cost more. It's starting to come down, but how companies and agencies navigate it alike.
All right. Well, end of 2023, we're going to be asking you about those things. So thank you so much for being on the program.
Thanks, Mimi.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.